Okay, I'm going to start now. So hello everyone, thank you for joining our webinar today as part of the Social Media Insights series. My name is Alistair Wheat, I'm the Head of Digital here at Gorkana, and I'm delighted to invite Simon Collister to join us today to talk about using social and news media data for deeper analysis and prediction. Simon is a consultant and researcher and lectures at the University of Arts, London on communications, and is going to be talking us through a number of the bits of research that he's been doing and work he's been doing with clients, as well as the sort of content that he lectures on at the university. So we're going to go through what Simon has in a short moment. Just to quickly introduce Gorkana, we are a media insight and analysis business. We work with clients of all sizes, and we look at both social and news media, both in our monitoring and our analysis. And we're now part of a wider global business called Decision. And so there'll be you'll probably hear more comms from us on that, and we'll be doing more webinars like this together with our partners in other parts of the Decision business. We are also, as Gorkana, part of the industry body called AMEC, and I just want to give AMEC a little bit of a plug actually now, because we've got in September Measurement Month from AMEC, and there's going to be a whole range of events coming up. A number of them are free, some are invite only, but I would encourage anyone who's interested in the subject of today's webinar to check the AMEC website out and to look at the content on there. You can go to amecorg.com and you'll find the link. I've put the direct URL on the page here, or you can just Google AMEC Measurement Month and I'm sure this will come up, or you can also find them on Twitter at amecorg. So check that out. For today's talk, we're going to look at the big challenge area for companies and researchers, people like myself, when looking at social data and other sort of media information and trying to think about how to analyze it. And obviously social media has been a really good thing for comms generally, I think we can all agree that, but lots of different people are approaching it in different ways. So just to find out a little bit about the people who've dialed in today, I just want to ask a question for you, the audience, before we get into hearing what Simon has to say. And so the question I've got for you listening now is, what do you mainly use social media for? Is it first of all to promote content? In other words, it's just a broadcast channel, you just wanting to get retweets and people sharing links? Or secondly, is it to identify, engage with the media? In other words, you want to build relationships with key media through Twitter, because most of them are using Twitter now. Is it to actually do outreach? In other words, you in your function are actually trying to directly communicate with customers and clients. Or is it about monitoring brand? In other words, to seeing what people are saying about you? Often that can really be a focus on risk monitoring, making sure that nothing untoward is being said about you online and that you're not caught blindsided. Or finally, is it about pitching stories? So you just want to use it as a way to kind of get your press releases out, your messages out, and it's just another way of simply connecting directly to journalists. So I'm going to pull up a poll. I'll give you a few seconds just to then answer that. So here we go. Great, thanks. I can see people filling that in. Okay, I think we've got a clear leader on here. Okay, now, most people have voted, so I think that's enough. Let's just kind of share the results now. So our results.
Keeping with the tone of my presentation, Alistair.
Yeah, it actually is, thankfully. So interesting enough, so last place is pitching stories. It was the smallest at 5%. Second to last place actually is identifying, engaging with the media. Third place is monitoring the brand. And then second place with 19% of vote is outreach to customers, and the clear leader, well ahead of everybody else, is 63% promote content. So the vast majority of people listening to this webinar are using social to pump content out, just another way of broadcasting the messages that you've got. So I'm now going to just ask Simon to comment on that and to take us through his slides. Just to remind people, we had it on the opening slide. If you do have questions for us, you can start feeding them through. While Simon is talking, I'll be monitoring that and collating questions. You can also use the panel in the actual webinar, the GoToWebinar tool. And so we'll be looking out for that. So Gorkana Socialist hashtag. I'm now going to pass over to Simon and see what your comments are on the results of our survey.
Thank you, Alistair, and hi everybody. So it's interesting that we've got those results, and they mirror quite neatly, actually, a wider piece of research that was done by Cision and Christchurch Canterbury University. Oops, there we go. Sorry. Can we see the next slide, Alistair? Sorry. So this study looked at social media use and the types of things that PR practitioners do with social media, and we can see up front that we know there's a lot of time spent on social media for work, which is inevitable in this day and age. But if we look at what people are doing on social media, the results are interesting. They aren't too dissimilar in the next slide from some of the findings that we had from this particular poll. Are we able to skip on to the next slide, Alistair? So there we go. So promoting content, by far and away the biggest work task undertaken. So interesting that there were some definite parallels there. Monitoring down in next to last place. Identifying and engaging the media a little bit higher in this study, but I found this information interesting when I came in to talk to the guys at Gorkana, because I wanted to kind of demonstrate that social media is heavily used these days, and I'd argue, and this kind of research neatly backs up, that we're using it in ways that we're looking at promoting content or outreaching to stakeholders, and that's fine. But issues like monitoring and analysis, where I think, for a number of reasons, social media analytics and monitoring can really lend value to an organization, is still quite far down the order of what people are doing with social. And I wanted to kind of come in and make the case for perhaps doing more interesting and using more deeper analytics to get greater value out of social media. So kind of reading between the lines of this study, if we jump to the next slide, what I kind of took these data to mean was that, and if I'm perhaps being a little bit mean here, social media use based on the Cision Canterbury Christchurch survey is largely tactical at the moment. We're still looking at promoting content, engaging with people, or pitching stories. And again, that's absolutely fine. But part of me believes that as the internet fragments and public relations practitioners and agencies come up against advertising agencies, digital agencies, dedicated social media agencies, SEO agencies, all of whom are looking to do the same thing, then we are increasingly less differentiated from the wider marketing sector and comms sector. And that's not a good thing, and certainly in terms of being successful in my mind. And also, it tells me that, or data tells us that social media monitoring where it is done is limited to brand performance. And I suspect that's largely in terms of measuring against the promotional activity, and that's good to see that we're measuring and assessing our own activity. But again, I felt that from a PR perspective, there's more things we could be doing here. Certainly from the kind of the academic or the theoretical world, we talk about public relations being a strategic business function. You know, it helps guide an organization, whether that's a consumer brand or whether that's an NGO, helping guide the organization by making sense of the world around it, translating that into actionable insights, and then developing various strategies and counseling on various strategies to implement that. So I kind of came at this then thinking that there's more stuff we could be doing with social media and monitoring and analytics. There we go. I think we've got this intuition now, so we know when that next slide needs to come, I think. So I was kind of making this point that at the moment then, PR use of social media is not always strategic, and perhaps it is strategic. It's more about media strategy rather than kind of, high-level business strategy. And then, if we're confined to tracking brand performance, we're actually going to risk missing deeper analysis opportunities. And this is important because I think, as I've talked about, that media fragmentation happens, PR gets squeezed. I'd like to see PR kind of moving up the organizational or the client food chain so that we're in a position whereby we're sat at the board advising on high-level strategy, and shaping the kind of the direction and the future direction of an organization, rather than just at delivering kind of media tactics. If we jump on to the next slide, we will see then that I want to kind of make PR more strategic and make it, or give it the greater potential for deeper analysis, put that front and center. And I'm looking at the clock, we'll skip on to the next slide. So thankfully, my kind of current capacity, I was thinking, how do we do this? How do we make the use of social media monitoring analysis better and more useful? And partly I was enabled to do this through some work with some clients who were keen on exploring the same issues. And partly, and this is a cheap plug for a book that's just been published this month, with some work by myself and some colleagues, looking at text mining and digital analysis and kind of deriving real value from that. So I was able to kind of combine my kind of research interests with some kind of practical client needs. And I've had a play around with, using kind of quite, standardized ideas and methods to actually kind of define and develop an approach for social media monitoring that will give us greater value. And it's worth kind of mentioning as well that it was quite useful and interesting to talk to Gorkana about some of this, because what I'll do now is talk you through some of the findings from the kind of client discovery work, and we'll see that actually greater use of the available data is kind of the key to this. And I know there's a lot of kind of pure social media platforms out there, and what we're starting to find is that it's not just about social. Actually, that traditional media data information actually still has real value for what we want to do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through, just in general terms, some of the insights that I've kind of come up with in the last kind of 12 to 18 months working on some client projects. I can't go into too much detail about the client projects because I'm not allowed to, but it'll give you this gives you the context really of what I'm about to kind of cover off. And again, if you have any questions, as Alison said, kind of share them and we'll address those afterwards. So the process was really some kind of literature review around what's already out there in terms of processes for kind of trying to look to forecast and develop useful ways of, if not predicting the future, getting a really good sense of what is likely to be coming up in the short to medium term future. It's this idea of horizon scanning that some of you may do in your job or have heard about, assessing the external environment for your clients or your organizations, being able to understand what that's going to mean for the organization in the next kind of 3, 6, 12 months or more. And some of the kind of desktop research is neatly summed up actually in this blog post. It's been published by Adam Parker on his Show Me Numbers blog. And he kind of identifies what he calls the 4 laws or flaws of social. I've put a strike through the last one. We don't need to talk about that today. He's basically saying just be wary of any toolkit that offers automated sentiments. They can be useful, but there is still a lot of work to be done in automated sentiment analysis. So I really want to focus on the first 3 briefly, which are refine, contextualize, and then think about the weight of the information that you get through your social media analysis. So the first point about refine is that, as Parker says, rubbish in, rubbish out. And this is kind of a universal truth widely accepted. And I'm not suggesting that any of the kind of social media or media analytics tools necessarily pull rubbish in, because I know a lot of them spend a lot of time and effort in filtering and producing or decluttering, de-spamming the information that you get. But I think Parker's point here is that there is so much social media content out there now, so, such huge volumes and such great varied types, that actually simply running searches through all of it is not always the best way to do it, because we end up with a large volume of data, and if there's a lot of noise, making sense of that noise really is a big challenge. And I know from my own use of various social media monitoring tools that the initial set of results really aren't that useful. You have to go in and then apply what Adam calls sophisticated filters to produce quality data and results. But the key thing is this often needs to be specific to your organization, so it's no good kind of using some rather crude or basic search terms to try and find useful or relevant information. We really need to think wider about what does your organization need to know about, how does it need to know these things, and actually, what are the adequate sources of data for this? And this is kind of why I mentioned Gorkana is quite unique in that it offers both those kind of social and traditional media data, because actually we get to a situation, rather than talking about big data, we should actually be talking about small data, which is much smaller, refined or filtered data sets to really get to the heart of what it is that you want to find out. And that then links us to this kind of second point, which is about context. So when you've got this small data sets, what it should do then is actually give you a much more nuanced context around what it is you're looking for. What you'll find with a lot of the big tools at the moment is that they're keyword-led, so you'll put in a keyword, your brand or a product, and then that's not effective. So you'll maybe kind of develop a more deeper taxonomy. So your brand but not other related words or different types of related words. And this can give you sort of that context and that greater or that smaller data set. But then it also risks missing out on unknown data. So using keywords, we can only look for what we know is out there. But if we want to think about the future and what's out, further out on the horizon, then we aren't necessarily going to know the keywords for that. So how do we find that information? And then there's a kind of corollary point, which is, we know that the visual web and visual data is some of the biggest types of online content being produced and shared now. And keyword searching is really ineffective at finding what's in an image. And so an actor-led approach might deal with this, and what this effectively means is thinking about individuals and networks of individuals rather than simply going via keywords. And this point then leads us to the idea of weight or influence, really. And I've tried to avoid influence because it's a little bit of a loaded term and means different things to different people. Adam Parker talks about the importance of what's said, by whom, and how people react to it. And those kind of, again, nuanced factors you tend not to get from simple keyword searches. Keyword searches will give you a kind of way to filter by influence or by readership or by number of followers. But again, often those metrics are a bit too crude, and often what I found is if you want to filter out who are the most influential voices around a particular topic, it ends up being Huffington Post, CNN, BBC. And that makes sense because the tool is telling you these are the most read or the most widely important media types. But actually, if we're thinking about specific detail or context around an issue, that's not necessarily going to be the right answer. Again, we need to kind of filter right down to your organization and think about who are the stakeholders to your organization and what are they saying that may not be about your keyword or your brand, but we know that actually potentially those people will be talking about stuff that will matter to you. And although you can't find it through keyword searching, they might kind of hold the key to unlock some important issue that's kind of coming up further down the line. So from that kind of initial kind of background research, I then took, with a number of clients, some interviews to try and understand what those clients were doing in terms of horizon scanning and tracking what was further down the line, and found a number of key insights really, which kind of support those main flaws or laws of social listening. And with one particular client who was very keen on spotting changes and developments in policy on a number of issues, what I found was that talking to people, sorry Alice, if you just jump back to that previous slide, we found that, again, this point about small data rang true. So people were following specific hand-picked cohorts. They were using Twitter and creating lists of a small number of people which mattered to them. And this is this idea of actor-led rather than keyword-led. They weren't searching Twitter for anyone talking about that particular policy topic. Although there was lots of that, they found that if they wanted to know what mattered in a particular area, they were listening to what specific individuals said about everything rather than what everyone was saying about a specific thing. And it's this point about context. It was giving them an expert view of the field. So we create a filtered list around those individuals. So again, context is king. And we found that the kind of indicators of weight or influence were both visible but also invisible. So yes, on the one hand, we had people that had lots of followers who were journalists who we knew had a kind of visible importance. But at the same time, we were able to kind of see who they were following, build kind of networks around them, and were able to work out who was kind of invisibly important to that particular conversation or that particular policy area. So we were building this kind of contextual map or network, if you like, who had invisible importance. And this then kind of gave us a much kind of more qualitative value in the data. So we knew that these people weren't necessarily talking about our organization, but they were talking about stuff that mattered to our organization. And we found that in a lot of the cases, things they talked about that then happened, we could kind of say there was greater level of causation there, rather than just a correlation between lots of people talking about something and kind of conjuring it into existence. It really mattered to that group of people, and they really had an influence on whether things happened or not. And then linked to that, we had this idea of manual analysis. So the challenge in one respect was that we could surface from our small cohort of individuals a small number, or a decent size of important topics. So we could tell that in our particular policy area, there was a certain set of issues that were worthy of kind of listening to and taking further. And what we found was that in most cases, doing some manual analysis rather than just kind of running an automated search of a particular keyword. So we'd find our topic that was worth exploring further, and rather than running that through more automated search terms, we were actually kind of taking that topic and then putting some phone calls in, spending some time trawling through articles or journal articles, or doing a little bit more desktop research. And what we found was that we'd get a 6-month kind of window whereby, by doing a bit more kind of manual desktop research on a particular issue, we gathered information that was kind of 6 months ahead of what was then going to start appearing in social media. So social media is kind of great for kind of short-term bursts of immediate information and insight around breaking topics, but actually to kind of pinpoint and understand longer lead issues, actually it was to kind of surface general themes and then really kind of dive into them manually. And luckily this organization had a researcher on hand who could go away and kind of spend a couple of weeks doing this kind of research. But I know that in some kind of public sector bodies there is that kind of match of using automated analysis to identify possible topics and then doing manual analysis to kind of really drill down into and get a greater understanding of important events and issues. Having said that though, automation is getting better, and it's also useful post-reviews. For example, one of the things that the organization I was working with liked to do was to use Twitter and social media to spot new people and new organizations or actors who were maybe emerging on the scene. They weren't an established person, or they weren't an established organization, but by looking at who was connecting to their small cohort of small data, we could see actually automatically identify who was recently joining certain networks and who was recently starting to post information. So manual analysis is important, but we can't overlook automation because it is good and for some things, and it's getting better. And then finally, this is a kind of thing that the key point for me is that for a long time I was working in agencies around social media and felt that a lot of the traditional media monitoring organizations had kind of missed the boat on social and digital analysis. What I've discovered and what I've learned recently actually is that they've caught up, and the real benefit of those providers is that they have both the social side of data and also the traditional, kind of more conventional side of media data, which a lot of the digital platforms don't have. And actually, from the research we've done, we can see that actually the social and the kind of news or other traditional media insights actually lend themselves really well. So we've talked about this kind of difference between social giving you kind of insight on breaking topics and helping us find ordinary people or experts or policymakers or influential individuals, but at the same time news media gives us that kind of that government picture, that organizational picture, and the longer lead and the longer term side of things. So actually we found that by combining the two, you get that sense of understanding the longer term issues that are further out on the horizon with how they're impacting on the day-to-day performance of markets or news or policy making. So what we found was actually, again, rather than approaching this problem of horizon scanning or prediction or deep analysis based on a social versus traditional media typology, what we found was we're sitting down and working out what was the organizational problem? Where was the value for the organization? And actually, how could we best distill it from these different types of media? And in the case I talked about in terms of policy making, we discovered that news and academic sites like academia.edu, which is kind of a social network for academics, if you like, where academics upload journal articles, became this really kind of rich scene for long-term policy trends, whereas Twitter became a real kind of barometer of what mattered on a day-to-day basis. And if you can add in other internal data sources, then you can kind of really start to build kind of interesting pictures around your own either customer base or other kind of audiences that you have internally for your own organization. So it was really a way of kind of putting together small cohorts, thinking about what each type of media you're using offers you in a particular problem, scenario, or any other type of kind of organizational challenge, and then applying the solution to an analysis of both types of media.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, Simon. We've got some time for questions now. I just want to remind people that there are two ways to submit questions. We've already been getting a few through the portal on the questions panel. You can also tweet questions at us with the hashtag GoulKanaSocial, and if we run out of time, which I think we will be looking at how many questions we've got, then we can also try and answer some of those questions via Twitter afterwards. And you can also connect with someone on Twitter at Simon Collister, or if you want to ask questions to me on there as well. So just to go through some of the questions, first one, which is from Sarah, which is also a question I was having. Well, the specific question here is, could you clarify actor-led? And related to that, this question from me is, why you're using the term actor rather than influencer, which is a term that we often hear being used, rightly or wrongly, when people are talking about social media?
Two great questions, thank you. And I apologise for kind of maybe adopting some of my own jargon in a presentation to people that may not kind of share it. So just to clarify actor-led then, I think there's possibly two ways or two emerging ways of doing social and other types of analytics at the moment. There's the big kind of what I'd call keyword-led approaches, which dominates, whereby you go into your Cision or Sysmos or Brandwatch for balance, and you will add a keyword, and you will get back relevant mentions of that particular keyword. It allows you to track your brand in that particular way. An actor-led approach is interesting in that you start to build a list of actors, which, and this is where we talk about what is an actor, a list of individuals, or it could be a list of organizations or groups of people who happen to exist within the social space. I mean, if you think about Twitter as kind of perhaps the most visible example of where we can see actors on social media, it may be an individual, but it may be a corporate account, or it may be an organizational account, or an account representing an NGO, for example. So I use actor to kind of, rather than having to say individual and organization and group and website or whatever. So actors kind of, it's a more of a neutral term, but I think it's also an important one when we talk about influence, because again, I find influence or influencer problematic because it means different things to different people, and crucially it's different in different contexts. So the famous example is, or the famous joke is, whatever you search for and then click on influencers, whatever topic it is, Barack Obama is probably going to be in the top 10 influencers. But of course, if you work for an automotive brand, or you work for other consumer brands, you are never going to use Barack Obama as part of a stakeholder management campaign or an outreach campaign or campaign launch, for example. But he's influential. We don't deny that, because he's the president of the United States. So I think influence has to be defined by the idea of context and producing this kind of small data set. So that's why I don't like the term influencer, because you can have a group of actors who could be influential in one respect, like global politics, but they're not always necessarily influential in your own sphere of influence. You might find 100 people who have between them 5,000 followers. They know Barack Obama, but actually, if they're all policymakers in your field, they are influential to your organization. So that's how I kind of differentiate between keyword-led and actor-led. And some tools will allow you to kind of build a list of actors and search within that list, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thanks on that. That is a good neutral term, and I think it's a helpful shorthand. And I totally agree with you that I get frustrated sometimes when people use the term influencer, and actually they have a very different meaning in mind to what I might have in my mind. There's a few more questions. Simon, I think we're going to run out of time to go through all the questions. Are you okay if we can send you the emails after, and you can reply to people directly on those?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. So as long as we
one question people ask. Yeah, the webinar is being recorded, and we will be putting it on our Gulkana YouTube channel. So people, there's a couple of people are asking about that. And one question, just maybe to finish off with, which we're probably not going to have time to answer because it's a big topic. It's if let me get the right phrasing of it because there's got more questions popping in here. It's how do you rank the invisible influencers? Do they have a different criteria to those who are visible? It's like perhaps a slightly philosophical question for you.
Yeah, it is, and I kind of regret maybe using that distinction because maybe it's confusing. So I mean, I think it comes back to well, question to get even more philosophical. Why do we rank things? We tend to rank influencers in the traditional sense because the ones at the top have more followers than the ones at the bottom, and it kind of comes back to this point that is a crude metric, but it's still a metric of perhaps influence because they may reach more people. But if you start to kind of think about influence as we just discussed it in being a very contextual way, then sometimes it becomes harder to rank. So I talk about these kind of invisible influences, if you like, and what I really mean is if the visible weight or influence is that they have a lot of followers, that's still good, right? But if we kind of get a list of, say, 1,000 people who talk about a general area, say the automotive industry, we can rank them from kind of 1 to 1,000 based on their Twitter followers, and that's kind of the visible influence. But again, what we might find is that kind of 50% of that 1,000 aren't interested in our brand or don't talk about our brand or perhaps cover a completely different aspect of the industry. What we can do is we can find the 50 that do matter to us and kind of build out that wider network of who they are connected to, and that's kind of the invisible influence, if you like. So how do we rank invisible influences? Well, I guess it's a case of the invisibility really matters. Think about the right context. So finding the right people that matter to our context is kind of an invisible influence. And maybe we don't do in a way is perhaps think about, this may complicate things further, think about invisible rank as a kind of horizontal measure. So what we want to do is we want to find a small group and build out into a slightly bigger group. And that kind of invisible influence goes kind of horizontal. And once we've got that horizontal group of relevant people, then if we want to, because it still makes sense for us to go to the most influential in traditional terms, i.e. the one with the most followers first, because they have the most followers. And that's a kind of maybe vertical influence. I mean, I'd argue we can rank that vertical, visible influence. We can't necessarily rank the invisible influence, but it's a good thing for us to do to get a better context. Maybe you could rank them in terms of how close they are in terms of relevance. So if someone's really relevant to our sector, then perhaps they are higher ranked than somebody who is perhaps a bit further out in the context circle. I'm kind of making this up as I go along, but that's given me quite an interesting model in my head, and I hope it's helped answer that question. If it hasn't, follow up on Twitter, and I'll try and sketch out an image that will maybe kind of clarify that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if invisible influence could be quite a snazzy webinar title to get people to tune into.
Yeah, well, I mean, the more I think about it, it's more of a kind of contextual relevance. Influence, ranking them based on relevance versus ranking them based on more traditional metrics like audience, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Great. I think that's unfortunately all we've got time for today. If we were in a physical meeting, this would be the point at which I ask everyone to applause. But thank you very much, Simon, for joining us and for sharing the work you've been doing with us. and hopefully we can continue the conversation on Twitter afterwards or email.
Yeah, please do share tweets or drop me an email. I'm more than happy to kind of pick things up and explain things further if needs be. Hope that's been helpful.
Great. Thank you. Bye, everyone.